Welcome to our seminar this afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, I think most of you do, I'm Dave Messenger, I'm the director of the center. It's my pleasure today to introduce Vasit Sagan from St. Louis University. This was kind of a random occurrence. I met the VP for research, the relatively new VP for research from St. Louis about not quite a year ago, and literally just sitting at a common table for lunch at a conference without knowing each other, and got talking about some of the stuff that we were doing on imaging and remote sensing. And I think within a couple of weeks we were talking to Vasit about his group related to remote sensing from UAVs for agriculture and things like that. And so we were very fortunate that he was able to come out and join us here for the better part of today and yesterday. So Dr. Sagan is an associate professor with the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at St. Louis University. And his research focuses on environmental impacts of land cover and land use, climate change, with particular attention to water resources and agriculture. And as evidenced by the picture here, moving into stuff that we do a lot of here with UAV-based imaging. So please help me welcome Dr. Sagan.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor to share our research. So it's great to be here. I'm going to talk about today machine learning, augmented reality, and data fusion for agricultural remote sensing, and I call it plant phenotyping. Let me see. This is an imagery over a test site we set up in Columbia, Missouri. That's 2-hour drive from St. Louis, Missouri. And some of the data I'm presenting today is actually from this field and other research fields. Remote sensing lab at SLU, and basically I've been at SLU for about 11 years, and that's where I built this lab, and currently equipped with all types of sensors, from unmanned aerial systems to a variety of other cameras and systems. And we work at different scales: ground scale, airborne, and also satellite level. And university has about 50 aircrafts like this, and we could use for remote sensing studies as well. Those are some of the field sites and this that. But my own background is a PhD in geospatial sciences, and I teach a lot of CIS classes. But just because of nature of funding and what areas we are mostly funded. And so our research, especially the last several years, focused too much on crops and agriculture, unfortunately. And there may be a lot of other exciting stuff I want to do, but this is what I'm funded for, right? So I thought about what to present to this group, because IIT is known for imaging sciences. I know about, and faculty here, research going on for decades. I thought about if I wanted to focus my topic to a specific application of remote sensing, and just spend an hour with explaining algorithms and equations, or focus on like a broad topic or project we have been working on, and then at the end I thought this may be a better route, like broad and report on one of our projects. So this is what I'm doing today, and focused on crops. So why agriculture? Why we are interested in this? What's the motivation? So a number of things. One, there will be a 63%, even more, up to 70% increase for demand for agricultural products by 2050. And this is primarily due to increased population worldwide. And then on the other hand, and climate change and this, that, there is a projected change in precipitation patterns worldwide, and more drought and dry and times, and projected for 2050s, 80s, and droughts like 1930s, like Dust Bowl, and those in 1956 are expected for the century. And so, and on the other hand, we have water issues. And then the current agriculture irrigation systems are less efficient, like actually 30-40% efficient. That means we are wasting a lot of water on agriculture. And then 50% of greenhouse gas emissions are actually from agriculture. And are we sustainable or not? And are we keep growing corn, or we can switch to more sustainable crops that produce less greenhouse gas and with less water or irrigation. And then the pollution is one thing, but another issue is and people interested in farming, and a next generation of students and people today's and after 10 or 20 years, and there will be enough people interested in farming. And currently average age of farmers is 70 years old, and after 10 years 80, 90. So do we have enough people who can invest time and produce food for us, right? So those are challenges. That's why, and we have been focusing on agriculture and this stuff. So without this microphone, is that okay? Can you hear my voice? Okay. So this is a map showing under future climate by 2025, and the worldwide water availability or stress. And whatever these red areas we see is areas will be under high temperatures and greater demand for water. And you see Midwest and one of the Great Plains and Corn Belt and those areas will be under water stress. And also many parts of the world, like Eastern China and India and portion of Europe, and all of those areas where our food come from today will be under water stress in the future. And so because of climate change, and we'll see decline in crop yields. And all of those red areas basically will experience, based on the projection, up to 50% reduction in crop yield. So, and you see most part of US on that red line. So, so that's why we are interested in agriculture. We are investing on this. In Midwest, and due to rising temperature, and there is a projected decline in both soybean and corn yield. These are two major crops in Midwestern United States. In 2012 was a significant year for Midwest agriculture because we had a record-breaking drought, and many parts of the U.S. actually were under severe water stress in 2012. And we have been applying for funding, grants, doing research, and future climate is that we didn't get funded until we see this big drought in 2012, right? And since then, some grants came through. But unfortunately, we have had such a wet years after 2012 until 2016, and every year we plant crops, we try to study, simulate stress, try to study how stress future climate would affect crop yield, and we haven't had that drought for those years, but we have seen last year and this year. So this is the uncertainty in the future climate, and you never know when do you expect a drought, when do you expect a water stress issues. So and effect of that is and here is a farm income in Missouri, and so what's happening, like in 2012 the income was, in 2011 was about 3 billion, and then in 2012 it almost close to 1.5 billion. So you see how drought and this water stress is related to our well-being and income as well. So goals of this project is to understand how future climate-related water stress affect Midwest agriculture, and can we detect stress early and implement some treatments or some measures to prevent yield loss, and how we can improve regional and global food security by using remote sensing. So that's the overall objectives of the project. And then the approach we are taking is there's kind of temporal constellation of satellites, but also like different scales, constellation of data from different scales, and ground scale, and then using tripod-based sensors and drones, and also manned aircraft. We flew one in 2014, NASA's aircraft in over there. The Tempo mission, that's really super high spectral resolution, like 0.6 nanometer spectral resolution sensor, to be launched in 2022 or around, and then all the way up to scaling up to satellites. So this is the approach we have been taking, and then we set up fieldless with different scale. We have fieldless like 1 meter by 1 meter, that grid scale for UAV and then ground applications, and then much larger plots for manned aircraft and satellites. So, and experimenting different scales, how best we can estimate, early detect stress, how best we can predict yield, and what can be done. So, and issues like that. And also, this is another test site in Arizona, Maricopa, and where we are experimenting sorghum crops. And this is a giant robot, and probably not first one of its kind. And there's a dozen sensors here, and then head wall, and this is one of the head wall cameras, 2 head wall systems, linear, severe, thermal cameras, stereo RGB cameras, LiDAR systems, and all in it, and all out, there's a PRI sensor, fluorescence sensor, any sensors are available in the market, and basically on this system, and collecting data 24/7. I say 24/7 because we are also collecting data at night, and what's emitted from plants, and what can be measured, and things like that. And also flying drones on top of that. Also it's equipped with a variety of cameras and systems, and looking at stress, and also future of energy, bioenergy, and future petroleum, and things like that. So those are our experimental sites we have been looking at. This is actually an experiment we have done in St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis City, somewhere here. And those are footprint of that airborne imagery. Those blue dots are where we set up targets and did field collection. And this was on NASA's Geotazo system, and that collects data from 290 to 740 at about 0.6 nanometer spectral resolution. So this is another test site, and actually there are a number of other test sites too. 2 hours from here, it's Columbia, Missouri, and this is a small scale, like 4-acre plot, and each of those lines are different treatments, different plant species. This is a much larger scale up of this to be able to detect from Landsat, Sentinel, and also Worldview satellites. On this, and there is another type, the grapevine experiment here. This is sorghum, soybean, and different crops. And also, whatever red dots here, it's more targeted to detect how ozone pollution would affect crop yield. So we are looking at multiple stressors, and ozone is one, and water stress is one, and also chemical pollution, like in the soil, or landmines and kind of explosives, how that complicates the stress signal we can detect from sensors. So, and is that the best way to identify or differentiate one from the other? So, different experimental sites we have been working on. Some examples of early stress detection, how do we do it? And we go back to how plants react to light and different conditions. Basically, like 56% of incoming light is absorbed by plants and used for photosynthesis, and convert plants convert that energy to chemical energy. And then some of them is like 20% is dissipated as heat, some disappear as transmitted through the leaves and air, and then about 11% can be reflected. And then chlorophyll fluorescence, this is a challenging but very interesting area of research, and especially in recent years because of we have nice hyperspectral cameras becoming available both at the ground level and drone and this that, and also at satellite level in incoming satellites will be able to provide the data we need to measure this. So it's about 2%, but it's a very critical parameter that can tell us about what's going to happen to plants, kind of early indication of stress or other issues related to agriculture. So, and basically we are looking at those parameters, which one can tell us about pre-visual issues on plants. So this is the first step. So we establish metrics that can tell us what's happening to plants, and then two, how we can estimate that from various sensors, ground, satellites. So this is our field measured data, actually, and again, an open agricultural systems, and change in stomatal conductance. June 18, that's the time the plants were well irrigated, no stress. August 19, plants were exposed to stress, and what we see is when there's no stress, you don't see much difference in stomatal conductance. But after stress, you see how change here, a significant change in stomatal conductance. And then I forgot to explain that this data represents for actually 0% irrigation, so no irrigation, rain flat, right? And then 50% irrigate, and then 100% irrigate, like full irrigation. So between those three treatments, when there is no water stress or rainfall is good, and what we see is very little change in stomatal conductance. But when it's stressed, then what we see is 4% change, and when there's for irrigate plants, and then 50% irrigation, we see about 6% change, and then almost 17% change for and so for irrigation. So basically, the less irrigation plants has very small stomatal conductance after exposed to water stress. And another parameter is fluorescence yield, a term that used to describe chlorophyll fluorescence. And there is also some degree of change. It's not that large in terms of magnitude, but this level of change, like between irrigation, no irrigation, like 26.4 to 38, this level of change is significant for plants, and we call that chlorophyll fluorescence only accounts for 2% of the reflected light for plants, and so this is a significant change too. So our goal then, finding the best spectral areas, indices that can best capture stomatal conductance and fluorescence yield for early stress detection. Canopy temperature have been used for a long time for stress detection, and it's great, it has problems as well, right? And then there's an index, PRI, photochemical reflectance index, and very common in plant community, widely used as well. And then chlorophyll fluorescence usually best detected at wavelengths of the 690 and 740, because chlorophyll fluorescence emission is maximum at those wavelengths. That's why we need wavelengths here, but at very narrow, and best is like under 1 nanometer spectral resolution, but 3 nanometer is possible as well. So we are looking at here. I talk about machine learning computer vision, and it's great for many applications, but cases like this, we need just that spectral bands, not statistical methods, not machine learning. So, so that's why we are looking at those wavelengths. Now, how can we best utilize this to monitor early stress? And red edge index, usually it's calculated as a ratio of 760 and 694 nanometer or 760 nanometer. And in fact, and this has been proven very useful, but in fact, 760 is chlorophyll, very close to this chlorophyll fluorescence absorption reflectance band. And 694, very close to 690, and that may be another reason that why this thing is so important for plants, and maybe why red edge index has been so useful. And those are good. And so among those, actually, this is the one that can tell us more about early stress and along with the PRI and red edge. So the summary of this, and we have used data from multiple sites, multiple seasons, variety of sensors, and come up with what indices, like a summary of what indices really work best for, in this case. So, and all of those indices correlate with stomatal conductance, fluorescence, and then electron transport measured using microsystems, and then we come up with and all. Yeah, here's how, and this lenses represent R square, and whatever R square here, and then different indices, PRI, and then variety of indices published in the literature. And this is our indices, and basically based on those data, and if there's a modification or improvements can be made, and this is what we find out, a modified PRI index, and also a normalized spectral index that best correlates with stomatal conductance and the stat. And we apply those to monitor actually crops in open agricultural systems and predict yield and to deal with water stress issues. Now, remote sensing platforms.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Go back one slide. So that index of yours at the bottom, is that based on a data mining type approach, or do you have physiological type approach that you use to identify those wavelengths?
Very much like relating field measured stomatal conductance and fluorescence data with spectral bands.
Okay.
Strictly, and two information we have used. One is actually spectral reflectance absorption features, and a partial the square impression. So, and there are numerous cameras, thermal, hyperspectral, RGB, this, that, and do I need all of them? Which one works for my case, right? That's another question we often ask. And for water stress, and multispectral cameras may work, and thermal works, and hyperspectral is the best. And radar, LiDAR may not be an ideal tool for that. And for fluorescence, hyperspectral is the best. And colorful photosystem and hyperspectral is the best. And then high biomass, maybe RGB and LiDAR, and those are systems. And but from this line to here also, what you see is the cost of those systems, and especially for the people who, yeah, I mean, like, I mean, it's great that RIT has like big idea proposal one, and for like UAS remote sensing, that's great. We have funding to purchase all cameras, but and a poor faculty like me, I mean, buying a 100,000 camera, right? This is a significant investment. So, so the question here is like, do I need all sensors to do the same or not? So that's the first line of assessment. And of course, we tested head wall system and simulations or not, and then field spectroscopy. You have a few of them here, and spacing camera. The thing I want to talk about is NASA's Tempo, and which has about 1,000. No, actually this one, yeah, 2,000 more bands within 290 to 490 nanometer spectral region with 0.6 nanometer and spectral resolution. And base spec has another one too, and but head wall is the best among those affordable cameras can be deployed on drone. So we integrate cameras as well. This is 3 cameras, base spec, an RGB, multi-spec, and then thermal camera. And then we flew NASA's aircraft there in Missouri. So those are types of sensors we have utilized and for this data set. And of course, calibration is a big thing. I don't have to, no need to mention. And spectral, like spectral on targets. And also there's a homemade targets. We just panelists. We plant a variety of in different colors and measure those reflectances in the field at that day. And also, those are really good to understand the angular differences in incoming light and also reflected light to look at the RDF issues, and we deployed in the target. And also for thermal cameras, actually it's an interesting area of research as well for calibration of thermal data sets. As you know, in any minute, like aerodynamics may change. That may change your calibration procedures. So what we did is we had a handheld snapshot thermal camera, very cheap, $1,000, right? And then you can just point and shoot fixed imagery. And then we deployed targets like this. It's large enough, can be actually mapped by thermal or RGB cameras. It's also numbered. We can see the number as well. So what we did is, and before the flight, we just snap using that point and shoot camera, collects the temperature of this target. And that's the reason also why we put this in the middle of this just open, and just to have background temperature and also target temperature. And then it's easy at the end, we find those and correlate the ground temperature with drone temperature. So that did work very well. So calibration is important, and that's what important part of any mapping and exercise as well we have been doing. And then in terms of calibration, a number of things, we tested. One is target field spectrometer option, right? Then often what you get is relative reflectance. The challenge is like each flight path come back, depending on the time delay. Again, incoming light and that may change. And so that's one challenge. And then NV provides a empirical method, very fast, quick, with 15% error, relative reflectance. And then radiator transfer, flash, mud trend, and those are great but time consuming. And downwelling radiant sensors are widely used today as well in drones and instead. Good, but often like if you want to calibrate the severe band images, you don't have one, like downwelling radiant sensor. And so so we have been working with those challenges, and still I think it's for everybody, it's a work in progress, especially when it comes to drones. And then also relating this to satellite imagery, what I'm showing here is worldview through reflectance data set, so red color here, and then atmospherically correct using flash, and then green is field measured spectra of plant canopy, and then the original worldview 3 imagery. So see how calibration is important. Without calibration, you may be looking at totally different data sets and things like that. And shadow and soil, those are another issues too. In the past, the satellites, I worked with decades, I've been working with satellites, right? And then on that, and we don't, and maybe there's issues with shadow, but it's not that significant. Even there's shadow, it's very difficult to isolate shadow from other things. But with drones, and you are looking at different levels of shadow, not just shadow. And so how to correct for those, that's an interesting area of research as well. So one of our test sites here, and as I said, we got a grant, big grant in 2012. That's about 20 million grant. Many universities involved in Missouri. Then we experimented throughout for 3-4 years, but the problem is every time that a planting season, like April, May, that time, we couldn't even get into the field because too much water. And we got just a couple of sunny days, muddy, we planted, and after a week we came back, rain killed all of the plants. So it was an interesting experiment until 2015. So what we come up with is, this is another field that a drainage system was placed under the field. So it restricts what depths a plant can absorb water. So basically, and using plastic barriers at different depths. Here, a plant root depth is restricted to 0.3 meters. Even if it rains today, and then water is just drained drain that away, right? And then next day, if there is strong sunlight, you will see stress. And of course, another rain will recover, but so at different depths, and that's how we simulate or implement different levels of stress in open agricultural environment. So for 0.45 meter, here 0.75 meter and 0.9 meter, different depths of water stresses implemented along this panel. And this is one of the sites you see from the drone. And also, we have multiple sites, big, small, and we need water, especially at early, late growth stage like July, August, and that's where we implement different treatments as well. And also, this is an interesting photo, a plant science from University of Missouri, Columbia, and then a remote sensing scientist from my lab, and then a computer machine learning expert, computer scientist. Three are working how to water plants here. Very collaborative effort. So and also we set up like field irrigation systems like this. And then I'm going to show one experiment and where no rain and within that week or 7 days time frame, start July 15 and then ended in July 20. And before there's whatever these bars are rain and up to 25 centimeters that day. And then temperature and max temperature, minimum temperature, right? Field temperature, and then how temperature is rising all the way, and then there's no rain here, and then there's a few times of rain, but in this week there's no rain. So the great thing was that is we tasked Worldview satellites for to collect data for us, and for a number of days. And then we conduct field experiment drone data during that time frame. So those are RGB images. On July 16, it's in drone-based RGB images. Actually, it's satellite, Worldview. And then same field, and we see some level of stress on July 20. This is UAS. And then next time, July 22, this is Worldview satellite images. So we are lucky that we task satellites, and it happened that we are able to collect data in that week during that experiment, and Worldview Digital Globe has been able to collect us data, and before and after July, actually, it's a great experiment. What you see here is no stress on July 16, satellite data, and then and UAS data, we start to see stress, and then stress, this is 0.3, very shallow root depth, that panel. And then on July 22, stress developed to our other panels. This is straight RGB imagery, right? And without any processing. And then this is a NDVI, or what I use NDVI, and how stress developed over time on those areas. And this is the panel most stressed. And then the water stress index and temperature map from satellite, and then again the satellite imagery for that time frame. So and we are able to capture that stress development and recovery within that week, and also we have done experiments from before sunrise to sunset, and so we wanted to see how stress develops within a day, and then if plants can recover or not. This is actually an Mavic-based, very cheap drone imagery, RGB imagery. This is a thermal map, canopy temperature map within that 1 day time period. So, yeah, so for that experiment. So now we are able to detect stress early, and we can measure, and we can quantify stress and need for water irrigation, and what I'm going to do with it, and so next step is like that use spectral indices, and next step will be how I can detect this morphologically, like leaf shape, rolling, and those parameters will change when plants are exposed to stress. So that's where we use computer vision to look at early stress and talk about or estimate if plants can recover or not if it's irrigated, right? Can we take those measures, irrigation, to prevent yield loss, and then prediction of yield. That's really, and it's important because if I can predict yield months ahead, so I can prepare for what's coming, right? And increase in food prices and this, that. So that's why, and next step, we did use machine learning to predict crop yield, kernel yield, and months ahead. And then the other thing is used computer vision to actually characterize leaf rolling and a plant can recover from stress or not. So what's a machine learning? When I met with graduate students today, about 70–80% said, yeah, I'm interested in computer vision. I'm doing a machine learning, remote sensing. That's great, and today's hot topic. But machine learning has been around for decades, and I remember in 1990s, 1995, when I was doing my undergraduate, I worked with PCA, PCI, the Canadian software, supervised, unsupervised classification, and that's a machine learning too, right? Supervised, unsupervised classification. But the topic came back again in the special recent days. One is development in sensor systems, availability of data, and also development in computer sciences and both hardware, software, number of things. So what's a machine learning? Basically, learning without, based on the data, training data, and then predict other things. In everyday life, we use machine learning, like just on Google search cat, right? Cats show up, cat faces, and sometimes tigers too, as a cat. So that's a machine learning algorithm running behind on Google Earth too. So in a simple way, and this is a poll, I want to see poll healthy or not, and basically using machine learning techniques, deep learning or this, that, I want to split or identify as many as hundreds, thousands of features that describe this poll. Can be fracture, shape, patterns, anything related to this, and then pull out all this different type of information. And then on the other hand, I have ground truth, correlate that, build, train my model, and apply it to something else. So this is in simply, and so on our machine learning algorithms, we utilize number of data sets. Again, those are sensors built in my lab. Here we have 4-5 camera, and actually, and we also set up like stereo imaging, one camera RGB looking down this way, another one looking this way, so we can get best estimate of height of plants. And then NDVI camera, RGB camera, FLIR thermal, parrot multispectral, and Hubble nano base spec, and another IC, another thermal camera. Basically, utilizing various types of data, the goal is to estimate plant phenotypes and predict yield. So, and I'm not going to talk too much about this unless there is a question. So often we use regression analysis, partial square regression, Gaussian process regression, stepwise regression, multivariate linear regression, etc. And then on the other side, machine learning models like neural networks or this, that, and also provide some regression analysis like support vector machine regression, Bayesian network, extreme learning machine, and then deep learning, etc. So, and we have utilized extreme learning machine and then deep learning. And the challenges, those work well if you have 1,000 and millions of samples. But what we are dealing with here is most hundreds of samples. That's the challenge, and our fitting and how. So the development then, and we focused on fine-tuning existing algorithms to overcome issues related to lack of sampling, right? So that's where we are coming up new algorithms and deep learning, both in deep learning and extreme learning machine. So just one recent publication on extreme learning machine from our lab, and then a couple of new deep learning algorithm is focused on this topic, is currently under review. In simple way, what we have done is we took RGB imagery, again, split the imagery to a variety of features, multispectral, thermal, and then hyperspectral too, and then bring those information and fuse them at an information level and correlate or regress those imagery data with field measurements to come up with a model to estimate a variety of data. So this is the process of data fusion. I mean, and we know radar, optical data fusion, and using PCA, this, that. What we are doing here is extract information, features specific to a target, and separate it from RGB, MSI, and then multispectral and hyperthermal, and then feed those features one by one, regress against outcome, ground truth, and find what parameter can be best estimated as fusion, what's the contribution of RGB, multispec, thermal, and then do I need all cameras, and in terms of worldview, what bandwidth do I really need to estimate that parameter, and what about lens set? So this is the type of exercise we have been doing. This is the some estimated results, like RGB imagery of one field, chlorophyll B, chlorophyll A, and whatever red areas means bad, green means good. Here is chlorophyll A, for example, like 50 milligram per square centimeter area. 0 means there's none. So it's kind of estimating all types of phenotypes, like A, B, nitrogen, and if plants are doing well, whatever red areas means experiencing nitrogen stress because of a lot of rain. Leaf area index, biomass, dry, fresh biomass, number of phenotypes. And then from there, what we do is, and this is the experimental field, and as you see, this is a worldview imagery. It's a large agricultural field. There are about 20 to 30 different types of crops, just crops. And those are like different colors representing different crops here, like soybean, and soybean 1 to 3 is 3 different genotypes of soybean, right? And different types of corn and things like that. So the idea is, and we have specific plots where intensive field campaigns were complete, then built models were built, then scaled up to satellites like Worldview and Landsat and Sentinel. So this is the exercise we have been doing. What I'm showing here is terminal yield, whatever the crop is, was actually usually harvested in September or October time frame. What I'm doing here is predicting terminal yield using data here in July 18 and August, September, and then it's late average. Basically, the idea to can we predict yield, terminal yield months ahead. So and then what other reasons? Soil moisture, rainfall, what's happening, nitrogen deficiency or not. So then we can provide guidance for some preventive measures, right? We are very impressed, and so far, and this is one of the machine learning techniques we developed. This can be improved, and still work in progress, of course. The more the data, more the samples is better. And then the last topic is like, especially for NSF grants, we do great research all the time, algorithms, equations, but that never gets to public, right? And then as I said, our average age of our farmers are 70 years old, right? So how we can attract our young generation to future farming, whatever it is, so that's another area we have been looking at. So, and what we are doing is augmented reality and then other things, technology, to attract kids. They like iPads, iPhone, so give them iPhones, iPads, but develop some tools so they can play with agriculture, they can play with drones, right? So in Science Center, we set up a grow exhibit, and it's actually one of my PhD students. So this is a very clever robot. It can measure temperature at different levels, this level and different levels. It can measure soil moisture, soil temperature as well, and you can draw a line and then or pre-program it. It goes there in the field and collect the data for you, right? And then the kids really like it because it's like just like their toy. It's bigger toy, and they can see temperature here. They can see, hey, what plots are doing good, and this is different. There's a drought tolerant corn, soybean, and then what plots are doing well. What does that do, right? So it's really fun. And then we also bi-weekly flew drones to demonstrate to public until NSF officer told us it's too much and I should focus more on papers and rather than spending a day at Science Center every week. So and clear day, cloudy day, we are there, and this is an expression of a 2-year-old. Is it 2-year-old? 7 years old. 7 years old, sorry. At Science Center who visited, and his favorite toy is this, right? And he of course played temperature and this, that here. And of course some drone, yeah, that's his favorite toy. So that's how we getting the science to the people, public. And this is actually a drone that generates 3D map of the Science Center. And there's a big combines here, tractors and corn and cows. Where does milk come from? Where does food come from? Right, chickens. Where does egg come from? All things there. And then how technology helps farming. So drone is not a bad thing. Okay, toys are not bad thing. iPads can be used to actually monitor your crops. That's the message we want to send out to kids, right? So. And this is basic real research is taking place right here, right now. So that's outreach and activity we have done. And then the other thing is, and yeah, this is Science Center view, grow exhibit we established. This is a thermal map, temperature map of that Science Center. And then this is a plant health map of the same area. And then the other thing we want to do is, and really tablets are so attractive, and I have a 12 years old, and basically the greatest punishment for him is taking away his phone, and even for hours, right? So, okay, that's what they love it. Okay, we provide some stuff like augmented reality and virtual reality, we know, and then augmented reality is basically presenting things in real environment, right? And augmenting things in real environment using computer programs. And in this map here is actually, this is a house very just like this room, right? And with a camera or sensor, what you see is like trees, this, that, right at front of you. This is what mixed or augmented reality is. So like a project we are working on right now is, so Microsoft HoloLens, you can wear it, and then what you you are in the cornfield walking, suddenly a storm comes and somebody sprays a bottle of water on you, you see rain coming, right? And then you touch corn and see crops, and that's another view of augmented reality. So, and this application, what we did is, and again, this is one field, and then we deployed now like tablets, iPads, and then so when you point it, and it pops up the field, and then you have different dates to show how plants grow over time, and you have different imagery, thermal, RGB, this hyperspectral, to show plant health, and they can click on there and see what's in there, what's happening. Red means okay, drought. This means stress. What's happening, right? And they can do, and then also, and yeah, this is some view of what we have been doing. And actually, we mock up, print a drone as well, and then put that tablet on that drone, So what they do is they point, and then when they move around, they feel like they are flying. Like they see what drones see when they like hover around a field, right? And this is the idea, and then how they enjoy it. We even printed as a carpet on the ground, and they can just walk around and play with it. And then the other thing is like this. I mean, this is just part of that somewhere in here. Right there, what happens is they see this one. So they can see how data is collected. Again, this is taken by another drone. This is one of our field, the one like the simulated stress. And then another click. Yeah, so actually all of those areas, it's our other test sites, fields we have been working with. And then, let me see and then they can see also like when they move down the drone tablet, and they can see this view, this field. And so that's the, seems like best way to attract next generation for farming, agriculture, right? So yeah, as I said, I mean, next step, what we are currently working on this one is like bringing through Microsoft HoloLens, allow people to actually walk through cornfield, see the storms, what happens when storm comes, rain and this, that. That's, and again, that's very much about it. Good work comes from great students. Lucky to have a group of students in my lab, about a dozen graduate students helping with me on this project. With that, let me see what I have. Yeah, and also I appreciate the great support from a variety of organizations, USGS, NASA, NSF on this project, and RP as well. With that, I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, Rollo.
So it appears that 50% isn't good enough with regard to atmospheric compensation. What is your, what would be a good error that you can accept for relative reflectance, especially for, I'm assuming a lot of those indices are based on reflectance and not radiance.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, 50% is not good enough, right? I mean, I would see at least 90%, and I mean in terms of accuracy. And in one project we have been working on initially before we were brought in. There was calibration procedures like reflectance is 1.3, and like for red band for plants we have seen reflectance of 0.8. And then come on, this is not calibration procedure, right? It's yeah.
And one more question. So, are there Europeans doing anything that you think is novel that should be investigated? Since you did make some references to some of the European publications.
Yeah, I mean the like zero fluorescence sensor is exactly targeted to do this type of research measuring fluorescence. So one satellite is specifically dedicated to measure carbon fluorescence, right? And that's one thing. And there's a lot of publications too. I mean, and I don't know what exactly the reason is, but my best guess is regulations. And we have seen drones just 2-3 years ago. And in Europeans, I mean, 1990s, there are papers. And what's it, Zarko Tajida, I forgot his full name, how to pronounce it. But they have been using head-wall cameras in 1990s, in 2000, measuring fluorescence and doing this type of research. And definitely there's a lot to learn.
So when you were showing your predicted yield versus your measured yield, your R squared went down dramatically between July and September.
Yeah.
And you would, at least naively, I would expect it to go up as you got much closer to the end of the season, right? I mean, you're close to picking everything. You should know.
Yeah.
So is there an explanation for that?
Yeah, excellent question. Actually, in September 23rd, that was almost end of soybean growth cycle, and very few plants left green. They're all either like in yellow or reddish because it's ready to harvest. So that's the main reason. So that's why the methods of like RGB imagery, thermal hyperspectral, did not work at the end of that.
Gotcha. All right, just a reminder, there's coffee and cookies and stuff like that outside in the atrium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.